I'm hoping that all of our guests are with us. I will go ahead and start us out with welcome to this session on women in education. I'm so pleased to be here. My name is Dr. Lynne Hamer. I am in the Department of Educational Studies. I do social foundations and leadership. And so I have had the privilege of working with most of the panelists, and I'm so pleased to be here. Just on sort of the housekeeping, if something should happen to me, i.e. if my internet goes out, maybe one of the panelists can just jump in and keep us moving through those questions. Okay, so don't wait for me if I go down. Okay, move ahead. My job description includes timekeeping, so I will kind of move us along, and we'll try to have about 10 minutes on each of the questions. And I believe that this session is being recorded. So with that, I would like to do our introductions. I will start with Ruth Leonard. Ruth Leonard is an educated activist and an education activist and a social justice advocate. Her fight for equality has always been centered on the classroom as the place of most influence. For over 10 years, Ruth Leonard has assured that her students receive an education that is rich with stories of Black triumph. Whether it is through her social media campaign to vote and take the census, through hosting teach-in events for community members, or for holding rallies and protests to keep police accountable, Ruth Leonard continues to fight for her community. Ruth Leonard is a vocal advocate to defund Toledo Police Department and refund Toledo, and is campaigning to reallocate over $40 million back to citizens of Toledo. So welcome, Ruth. Dr. Amy Thompson is the Vice Provost of Academic Affairs and is Professor of Public Health at the University of Toledo. Dr. Thompson is a recognized leader, and in 2017 to 18, she was selected to the prestigious MAC Leadership Program, where she represented U Toledo at various leadership trainings. Recently, Amy Thompson was one of 25 leaders selected nationally for the American Association of State Colleges and Universities Emerging Leaders Program, which is a big deal, and is a participant in the AASCU Becoming a Provost Academy. Dr. Thompson has published over 75 peer-reviewed journal articles and secured nearly $1.4 million in grant funding. So welcome, Amy Thompson. Anjali Phadke is a third-year student at the University of Toledo, majoring in bioengineering on a pre-medical track with minors in chemistry and psychology. Along with being actively engaged in a lot of studying, as we can tell, Anjali is actively engaged in student organizations across the campus and currently serves as the student body vice president, working with administrators to make the U Toledo experience even better. This year, Anjali Phadke will be on co-op at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, completing her second rotation in the biodynamic division of the Air Force Research Lab. Her future plans include going to medical school and becoming a pediatrician. So thank you and welcome, Anjali Phadke. And finally, Dr. Treva E. Jeffries is currently the Assistant Transformational Leader of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. Dr. Jeffries has also served in other capacities for the Toledo Public School District. Most recently, Treva Jeffries was the Assistant Transformational Leader of High Schools, following an 8-year tenure as principal of Jessup W. Scott High School. A skilled leader with a passion for education and expertise in curriculum, instruction, and leadership, Dr. Jeffries is dedicated to serving the community for the growth of future generations. So thank you for being here and welcome, Treva Jeffries. Finally, we will have our commentator, Dr. Charlene Gilbert. Dr. Gilbert is in her 4th year as the Dean of the U Toledo College of Arts and Letters and is a tenured full professor in the Department of Theater and Film. Dr. Gilbert believes deeply in the power of higher education to transform the lives of students and their families. An academic leader, Charlene Gilbert has improved student retention and graduation rates, closed equity gaps, and expanded research opportunities for undergraduate students. So welcome, Dr. Gilbert. All right, we'll launch right in. We are on time. So our first question And we'll ask Ms. Anjali Phadke to start us out with this, but everybody is on the panel is going to have time to discuss it. The first question, how would you characterize the state of women and girls in education today? What are the challenges and opportunities for students, faculty, and administrators?
Hi, and thank you everyone for letting me be on the panel today. I'm really excited. I'd like to first start off by saying that we're just getting started as a country and as a world of being very inclusive. If you look at the current statistics in the United States, women are not prevalent in medicine. It's still 64% to 34%. In law, that's the same thing, and that changes with minorities as well. Black women only make up 2% of all lawyers in the United States, which is really crazy if you think about it. You know, we weren't even allowed to go to college until the 1800s, but you know, women weren't even allowed to go to law school until the 1900s. So it's been pretty much it hasn't even been 100 years yet since we've been able to go to law school even. So I'd like to say that we're just getting started. We're just starting to break the glass ceiling with there being a female vice president, and we're starting to break the ceilings of becoming presidents of universities, being on upper administration, and paving the pathway for future generations. But I'm not saying that it's bad currently. I think that we're just getting started, like I said before. But yeah, that's how I would characterize it at the moment. Challenges wise, there's no matter what year we've been in, the last 50 years, there's always going to be a bias. There's always going to be even if it's hidden, of women can't do this, women can't do that, and we're just starting to say, well, we can, and we have, and we will continue to do so. So that's what I'd like to start off with that.
I'll go ahead and jump in, and I'm coming at this and probably a lot of my responses from higher education. I think the encouraging news is the increase in women attending university and colleges and community colleges. I mean, we see now that 52% of people entering the university at the undergrad level are women. 60% obtaining master's degrees are women. 52%, or between 52 54% getting PhDs are women. So the good news is they are attending college, they're completing their degrees. I think what factors into this conversation is what happens after they graduate, and what are the types of degree programs that they're entering in, and why are they going into those degree programs? Dr. Hamer's in education. Why is it that we have such a high percentage of women going into education, but so few going into STEM? And why do we have that when they graduate, such a gap in pay differences and salary differences? And and I'll talk more about this in higher education, why do we have more people, males in tenure track positions versus women in non-tenure track positions? So the encouraging part is we're at that first step where more people, more women are getting educational attainment. But we need to pause and say, but where is the equality there? Where is the equity there?
I'll touch on that as well. And I think that you made some great points, Dr. Thompson. I have a degree in biology and chemistry. So knowing that a lot of women don't go into the STEM or STEAM fields, that was very difficult for me to face the stereotypes of, what do you teach? Do you teach English? Or do you, teach some other traditional female subject area? So, I would face that microaggression quite often. So I do agree with you there. And thinking about what happens to women after they graduate, even though we are receiving the higher degrees. So one thing as far as specifically in TPS that we're doing is trying to make sure that we bring awareness to women in leadership and the disparity, between the women who are serving as teachers, being 90+%, staff serving as women and as teachers. And then once it goes up to the higher levels, we're seeing that trickle off. However, you talk about the state of where we are as women. I look back at our cabinet level, for example, and I can remember when there was 2%, maybe on cabinet, a couple of women. that served on cabinet, but now it's closer to about 40%, a little over 40% of the individuals who are on the cabinet level. So I think that we're progressing. I just think that we need to make sure that we're intentional when looking at the diversity when it comes to gender at those levels in the K-12, from the K-12 perspective.
And I just want to piggyback on what everyone has stated. I think I come from a perspective where I've been able to work directly with young girls, and I personally feel really inspired by this next generation that's coming in, if only because they are probably the first generation in a long time to not only recognize the inequalities, but also speak out against them. And there is a level of passion that I've seen even in my middle school students who are able to say, this is wrong, this is unfair. And if nothing else, they can come to either myself or another advisor to say, how do we fix this? And I think it's more of them recognizing the ability of their voices just as students that I'm really inspired by. Now, again, that's only on a school by school, case by case basis. But I do feel inspired by those students who are able to, kind of shake the table and say, this is what my brother went through and he was able to have these benefits. So why can't I? But when it comes to overall for faculty and administration, I think that we have reached a day of reckoning where we have to get out of our own ways. And what we thought was good and appropriate for the past generations or for us growing up is actually stifling the abilities of these young women and these young girls. And so I think it's just, it's going to take a lot of, I don't want to say professional development because I think that term has been worn out, but it's going to take a lot of internal retrospect from administrators and from faculty members who assume certain things about students because they are Black or because they are young women that they can't or shouldn't be able to have access to. I think we're going to have a come to Jesus moment where we have to realize that what we thought was okay, this next generation is not going to take it. And flipping around everything that we thought was okay in order to give these young women their own identities and allow them to grow in those identities.
Thank you so much. And we can see why these are women in leadership because they got straight to the point within their time. We do have a little time here and I see a hand, Sylvia, is it Sylvia Sue? Would you like to make one comment?
Sorry, that was an error.
Oh, okay, very good. Well, it gives an opening. I think we will just proceed through the planned discussion unless somebody has something they're just dying to say, we can fit it in. Do jot down, I think we will have a little time at the end. So if you have a question or if you want to put it in chat, please feel free to do that. All right, Dr. Jeffries will start us out on this next difficult question. And here's the question. 2020 was a difficult year for many Americans. Coronavirus pandemic, ongoing systemic racism, financial hardship, and a contentious social and political climate, to name a few. How are the multiple traumas of 2020 showing up for women and girls in education? What local initiatives are underway to address these traumas and improve those educational outcomes? So Dr. Jeffries, start us out, please.
Well, I did jot down a couple of points as far as how this trauma has manifested in our young ladies, and of course some anxiety, depression, and an increase of low self-esteem. I think that those are the various things that have shown up in our young ladies because of this new norm, this pandemic, and of course the onset of the technology and the gap that many of our students, especially our students of color, face when it comes to the access. So some things that we've put into place, and many of you are aware of this, is just trying to make sure that our students have, the technology that they need, no matter how many times it may break down, or they may break it, or do some things, spill water in it. We need to make sure that they have access, they have continued access to it, so that we can remove all barriers that may exist within their lives. One thing, we also have to be cognizant of their individual needs. So something that we've put in place are student support teams at each school, each and every school. And we have a district liaison that helps facilitate that, and making sure that whatever individual need is there, that we try to accommodate the students. So we look at the whole child, and just kind of thinking outside of the box and reacting, because I'm going to give you a concrete example here. You asked us to have our cameras on, right, today. I have a conducive, a background that's conducive to this environment, but our students may not at home. You don't know what's happening at home in their personal space. So requiring a camera to be on may not be the most feasible way to deal with the child during class. And it may re-traumatize that child when it comes to their self-esteem, and it may lower their ability to be successful in that particular class. So we just have to really think outside the box and not be as demanding, and be more understanding and compassionate towards individual children's needs, because those are some of the things that have manifested, like I said, during this difficult time.
And I'll jump in from a higher education perspective, both from students and faculty. I do think flexibility is key, because we often see women having to do a lot more in the home. So if somebody became sick or ill, or if somebody has lost their job, they often step up and have to take additional responsibilities, right? And so whether that be from a student perspective or a faculty perspective. So at the University of Toledo, we've tried to do as much as we can to support our students. We know that mental health has been a big issue during the pandemic. We've been doing things like telecounseling appointments. We've been trying to do some things with our flexible grading options. From a faculty perspective, we've also tried to do some things to support our faculty. Many of our female faculty have had to also, not only teach their classes, but now they've had childcare issues. Their children have been home with them while they've been trying to teach. They're trying to do their homework with their children. That's been a really a big challenge for them. So we've done some things like extending tenure clocks for faculty to try to, again, allow them a little bit more flexibility. So we've really tried to do some things to take some pressure off of our students and our faculty.
Thank you. Angela or Ruth, would you like to?
Yeah, I can jump in. It's really ironic. I was listening to the radio yesterday, and there was on NPR a story about how women who make 5 and 6 figures or more are struggling in the pandemic. And there was a counter argument of why this person was doing this research. And it boiled down to the fact that if women who are making 5 or 6 figures are struggling in the pandemic, that it is 100 or 1,000 times harder for women who have not reached that financial threshold. And I think that it's really important at this point to just offer grace as an administrator or a faculty member, not only to the students that you're interacting with, but also to yourself. And it's something that I think had to be learned in the midst of the pandemic, because when the entire world shut down, there was this kind of freak out of what is the next 4 months going to look like? What are the next 4 weeks going to look like? And having to atone to that new reality, I think affected women in a much different way than it affected men, as women being the traditional caretakers. And so I think that one of the biggest one of the biggest things that I've noticed is just the need for self-care, which is really important in any type of work. But the fact that women already go through their own sort of self-care, right? When it's that time of the month, you have to like figure out what do you need in order to make it from day to day, in order for you to be comfortable with your body. And now to be in the middle of a pandemic and to have children, and for teachers to have students, and for faculty to have their teams, how do you find that time to like cut off from all of the work? Because we often talk about working from home, when the reality is that you live at work now, and having students go through that, where instead of your homeschool, now your school is your home, and figuring out all of the nuances of what that means, and how your bedroom has now become your classroom, and what does that mean when it's time for bed? Is there stress that comes with that? Is there anxiety that comes with when you go into certain rooms that you use for your classroom? Do you still feel the same way about them? Is your playroom still your playroom, or is it your classroom where now you like Dr. Jeffries said, you have to turn your camera on because your teacher doesn't recognize your anxiety about what your reality is? And so I think that the pandemic has given a lot of people the opportunity to just take a breath and to reset and to practice self-care in a way that they may had been able to ignore before because everything wasn't so compacted.
Thank you so much. Angela Phadke, would you like to?
Yeah, of course. I'd like to say that the biggest thing that I realized during this pandemic is the amount of women who have had, children during the pandemic, or have had to take care of very young children while still working. I was just thinking about Cherie, Valerie, and how hard that must be, especially being, in administration. That's incredible that they've been able to not only work from home, not only raise a child, but basically teach them. When children are at home, the teacher can only do so much, right? They can't go to school. They can't ask the teacher for help. We have, women, and obviously, just parents in general, that have had to take on twice the responsibility with less time for self-care, as Ruth was mentioning. So the pandemic has not only taught women the importance of self-care, but it's also taught individuals in general the importance of being kind, letting people have a break, understanding that mental health is huge when people are in isolation. It's given people the understanding that everyone's in the same boat, and everyone should be kind and understanding. And I would like to say that professors in general have been incredible to me specifically. They've been insanely understanding, especially with any family emergency that's occurring right now. The amount of, trauma that people have had to face during this pandemic with, less help, honestly, with personal connection and such, is incredible. And that just speaks to the strength of women. That speaks to the compassion that they have. It speaks to just overall how amazing they are and how much they've had to take care of during this entire pandemic. So really, it's just shown me how strong we are and how much we are capable of.
Thank you. That was so interesting. I'm really looking forward to our discussion at the end. Our third question, and we'll ask Amy Thompson to start us out on this one. Dr. Thompson, what strategies work well to promote equity and inclusion in public education and higher education? As a leader, how do you stay mindful of who's at the table and who's missing? And what do you do once you realize people are missing? And then we'll hear from everyone.
Sure, thank you. And I'll probably frame this within higher education. And the first thing I want to say is, in my opinion, that anytime you're approaching equity and inclusion, you have to be very intentional about this. And this is something that you have to commit to, and it has to be, a strategic plan, and that this is something that is a daily practice as part of your institution, and that it is a priority. And so that's the first thing I want to say. And the second piece is that it's very data focused. It's really easy to say at the University of Toledo that we have a certain graduation rate or a certain retention rate, for example, for either students, faculty, or staff, but really disaggregate that data and look at it by differences by gender or race or ethnicity. And that really does begin to show equity gaps. And that's what's really important to look at and ask those important questions. Why do those gaps exist? Why are those individuals at such a lower level of retention or graduation? Or why is it that we have, so few women full professors? Why is it that we have so few African-American, associate professors? Those are the hard questions that we have to ask ourselves. And what are our plans to be, put into place to address those issues? The other thing I think is really important, whether this be students, staff, or faculty, is to create a strong mentoring network and mentoring program. That's something I was involved with the Provost office for both staff and faculty for women. And I was overwhelmed by the interest in that area. Women are very hungry for that. Particularly working in underrepresented minority groups with Dr. McCuther. That's something that we cannot do enough of, in my opinion, in institutions of higher education. That's a best practice. And we need to do that on a regular basis. So those are some strategies that I think are very, very important. The other thing is looking at how we're forming our leadership teams, our committees, and making sure that there's people around us that are different than we are, that think differently. That's how we move forward as an organization, as an institution, is the more diverse we are, the better we are, the stronger we are. And those different thoughts are what propel us and drive us forward. And so that's something that if you look around and everybody looks just like you, something is wrong. And you need to stop and pause and make sure that you intentionally include people that are different than you.
I just want to piggyback off of what Dr. Thompson said. I loved your point of bringing them to the table. I actually have that written down in my notes because I think oftentimes people who are directly affected by the changes that an organization wants to make are often left out of the conversation because people may think, oh, I know what's best for them, when their reality could be something completely different. And so I just love the idea of having a table big enough to include everyone so that all of the voices and perspectives can be included. And I think that's one of the best strategies, because oftentimes I think you may, or we may as leaders, get to a certain level where we feel like we have the answers. And because it works for us, we think it will work for other people. So definitely bringing together as many perspectives and allowing those voices to have the ability to make decisions is also really important. I've been a part of organizations that have wanted my voice at the table for the photo op, but when it came time to actually doing anything with what I had to say, it was, that's too radical, or we're not ready for that. So having both the people there and giving them the autonomy to make decisions and changes is really important.
I'll go next.
Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Do you want to go?
I was just going to speak to the fact that in high school and even in college, I've been given photo ops, or I've, had opportunities just handed to me because of, the color of my skin. But when it came time to actually hearing what I had to say, or, further wanting my opinion, it was kind of, put down a little bit. So I've definitely been in that situation before.
So a couple of things very quickly. Awareness is one of the main starting points. Making sure that individuals are aware, and as Dr. Thompson said, using that data to make sure that you drive that conversation so that people really understand what disparities exist, and that using national data and making them understand that you're not just speaking from you. This is not your opinion. This is something that actually exists, because people will argue with you, daily that it doesn't exist, or whatever, phenomenon you're talking about doesn't exist. But it's in the K-12 setting, it's very important to make it relevant. And that's something that many of our staff members often say. They're like, well, how does this pertain to what I do? How can I put this into my classroom? And giving them various solutions, but not just always giving it to them, making them reflect and do some work so that they can take some ownership of whatever it is that they're trying to implement to make sure that that equity in education exists. When we talk about bringing people to the table, I like to value, what they say and show that it's taking place. I think, speaking to what Ms. Leonard said, she has brought some phenomenal ideas that, I love. And it has been implemented. I don't know if we've actually, reached out to, tell her, hey, this came from you, but I hope that shows. And you're right, when you come and you give an example, you want to make sure that that person is validated. So when they're at the table, make sure that you're authentic and you do it with fidelity. So, that's something that I know that I try to make sure that I follow through with the individuals who are at the table. If they're not at the table, we have to talk about it. There used to be a time where we would turn a blind eye, but those days are over. We have to say, hey, I don't see this individual here, whether it be a female, a person of color, someone from the LGBTQ plus community. We have to make sure that we talk about it and have those hard conversations of why isn't this person here? Or why isn't this particular population represented? So not turning a blind eye to it to make sure that we can provide the need that's there. And so I don't know if I said this, but like I said, we may know a little about a lot, but we're not the expert in everything. So we have to make sure that those individuals are there so that we can see the big picture.
Thank you so much. Did anyone from the panel have anything that they didn't get to say on that? Angela, did you have, I know you were responding. Did you want to, you have some more time if you'd like to have some more. Are you okay?
I would like to say that it's never really been a malicious, we are specifically wanting you for the photo op and we don't want to listen to you in my situation specifically, but I think it's an unconscious oh, let's include you. We want to hear from you, but you know what I mean by that? No one's ever mean about it, but it's just it's like, I'm going to relate it to, speaking over someone and knowing what they want instead of letting them talk for themselves, that sort of thing. I'll equate it to that. No one's ever doing it maliciously, but it's just, a common, hidden thing that we're not explicitly showing. But I am grateful for the opportunities I've been given. However, sometimes I feel like someone else deserves it. Someone else deserves it more. And I don't want to take that opportunity away from someone. So when I say sometimes I feel like I'm just a photo op, I feel like someone deserves it more than me. And I don't want to take that away if I've already, been so grateful in the past.
Whoa, okay, I'm sorry. I gotta jump in real quick. Anjali, I'm talking to you directly. You are worthy of all of the opportunities that have been afforded to you. That's the first thing. Number two, do not shy away from the fact that it is an unconscious bias or it is unconscious racism that is allowing them to use your image and to not give you any opportunity to speak up for yourself, because that is what has landed us in this point, right? It's been women who have been shrinking themselves down, especially women of color who have been shrinking themselves down, who have been believing that they have had enough opportunities and someone else is worthy of whatever opportunity is made available. You are worthy of having your voice heard each and every time you open your mouth, not only as a student, but in general, just as a woman of color, you have a story to tell and you deserve to tell it. Do not ever, from this day forward, you are no longer allowed to excuse other people's oversight of your value. That's all I got.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
This is a wonderful panel. What a great combination of people. So we come to our fourth question, and Ms. Leonard, you'll continue on. Please to start us out with this, but the question that was assigned was, what is your vision for women and girls in education? And what do you believe it will take for us to get there? We'll start with Ms. Leonard and then hear from everyone.
So there's a film called Push Out that came out a couple of years ago, and it talks about the criminalization of Black girls in schools. And one of the biggest takeaways of that, there were actually many, but one of them is the fact that girls, especially Black girls, are sexualized at a much younger age. It is incredible how we are able to, as a society, put labels on young Black girls to say that either, oh, she's going to grow up and have sex really early, or she's going to be the girl who feeds into the Aunt Jemima stereotype, or she's going to be the girl that's just an angry Black girl that's always popping off at the mouth, when these girls are in 2nd and 3rd grade. So my main goal for women in education is to allow Black girls to grow up, allow them to have identities, allow them to change their identities, allow them to try on different personalities and not penalize them for simply having the audacity to change their mind, right? I think that young white boys have a lot more freedom than grown Black women, right? I think that that's the conversation that gets ignored a lot. How we allow more things for young white boys and say, oh, boys will be boys, but a grown Black woman is in charge of the entire culture. So my one vision for girls, for Black girls specifically, girls of color in education, is that they get to make mistakes, that they get to learn from their mistakes, that they're not held responsible when they're 18 for who they were when they were 11. That's my first goal. The easiest way to do that is, Dr. Thompson brought this up before, bringing them to the table and allowing them to have conversations about how they feel about society, whether that's their communities, whether that's their classroom, whether that's how the world views them. Allow them to be able to articulate their own feelings about things, because that's the easiest way to get to the crux of problems that young girls are facing, if you just let them talk it through. It's the same way with grown people. Going to therapy, the easiest way to unravel a problem is to simply talk it through. But oftentimes, I've seen in administration where Black girls are shut down a lot quicker because it's assumed that they knew what they were doing. It's assumed that they had already been taught not to do that, when they had spent just as much time in the educational setting that other students get, oh, he didn't know, or she didn't know. So giving Black girls, giving girls of color opportunities to just flower and blossom into who they're going to be, I think that's one of the easiest strategies, I think, to having a quality educational system that allows them to think for themselves. Oh, I'm constantly able to see the other side of an argument, so why can't I be a lawyer? I'm constantly taking things apart, so why can't I be a scientist? And with that, I'll stop.
I'd like to
go ahead, Amy.
I'd like to jump in. So I started kind of our conversation about talking about, the fact that we have a higher number of women entering, higher education, but, what types of jobs do they end up actually getting, and salary differences. So, when you talk about this vision of girls and women education, I think, seeing that equality and equity and pay is kind of an end game, but working backwards and kind of piggybacking on what was just said, I also think reducing, the bias that young women face in the educational process, and particularly women of color. When you look at studies that have been done in the classroom, and when it's blinded in terms of things like grading, and how women are often graded more stringent than male counterparts, or the opportunities that are often provided to males in terms of networking or mentoring as compared to female counterparts. I mean, this has been documented in many, many different studies. So that process is harder often in that educational pathway for women. The other thing that we've not really touched on is the role that sexual harassment plays in terms of the educational process, and how many women, face things like, being sexually attacked or sexually harassed in the educational environment, and how that makes them not want to attend classes or drop out of school. I mean, that's a major barrier for a lot of women through that process. And I think that we can't talk about that enough. So I think a lot of these things, as we talk about, a vision, it's, how do we get to that point where there's equal job access, equal pay, where they're entering the STEM fields in the same proportionate amount, and that they're encouraged that they can go into those, math and science and engineering, and that they have, mentors that are encouraging to them to go into those fields, right?
And I just wanted to kind of piggyback on what Ruth was saying. As far as, it's so ironic that you mentioned Push Out, because at the end of this month, we are going to have that documentary and panel discussion. So I think it's going to be March 30th. We were shut down because of the pandemic last year. So it was scheduled for last March, and we had to, postpone it until this year. So that is in the works for a virtual presentation. But one vision that I have is to make sure that we protect our young ladies when it comes to disciplinary action. I think that quite often there's one response to discipline, especially if it's a physical altercation, and that's to become physical with our young ladies, especially our young ladies of color. And although our young ladies of color are represented at 15 and 25% of the population, they're also represented in suspensions and expulsions at 45 and 50% of, the suspensions and expulsions. And I just really, truly believe that doing root cause analyses is important to get down to why the behavior is taking place. So if we look at a more restorative approach and look at why these behaviors are occurring in our young ladies, then I think that we would be less apt to disrupt their educational process. So I think that they need to be in a safe place and then receive the treatment and the handling, of their situations in a better way. So that's what I'd like to see, so that they can further flourish.
Thank you. Angela Phadke.
Thanks. I was just thinking about this off the top of my head, but something like as simple as dress codes is very important to young women as they're growing and going through puberty at a young age. I mean, if you think about it, really, dress codes probably haven't changed much in a lot of districts since the 50s, 60s, and it's, in my opinion, over sexualizing young girls to the point where they have to cover themselves up, even if it's very hot outside. If, let's say in poorer districts where, schools might not even have good AC, you're punishing the girls for growing when you could just be talking to the boys about not over sexualizing the females. And that's just a small thing. It's little things like that have, made me realize that we really are just unconsciously shrinking women down at a very young age to where they feel like they have to cover themselves up, they have to shrink down, they have to be smaller for someone else to be bigger. And I think that's
that's something that at a very young age, we should be able to tell the younger generation, like, you don't need to do that. And I mean, Ruth just told me that, and I'm 20 years old. You know, I've been doing that since I was little, probably. And even if I'm able to say, you know, you shouldn't do that, I'm still doing it myself. So it's something that is a constant growth process. But if I was taught when I was younger, you know, Anjali, you don't have to shrink yourself down. You're fine where you are. You're allowed to grow. You shouldn't be over sexualized by people that are older than you. I feel like things would have been maybe a little different.
Thank you so much. All right, lightning rod, or lightning round, I should say. One sentence, maybe two, not three, from each of our panelists. What one action can we take today to support women and girls in education? So who wants to go first? Just bam, bam, bam.
I'll go first. First of all, words matter. And the way that we frame things and we talk to people, right? And you know, the encouragement that we give. So I think that's one thing. And I'm going to say two, be a mentor, be a sponsor for people, right? Be supportive of other women. Studies actually say that women can actually be harder on other women or girls. So remember that, right? What's the goal here?
Thank you. Next. Beautiful.
I'll go. I say that we need to elevate our level of emotional intelligence and just have some empathy when it comes to all of the feelings and the struggles that women are going through, no matter what age, and respond accordingly to the individual and not the situation.
Thank you. Next.
I'll go. My one thing is being kind and empathetic to everyone, like Dr. Jeffries was speaking about, and understanding that a woman at any age from 2 years old to 50 years old has a different brain. They have new intelligence, something you've never heard before. And, you know, making sure that you're listening to a woman of any age, understanding that they are as intelligent as you are, just in a different way, is very important. The moment that we're able to listen to people and actually see how unique they are, then, you know, we can not have that superiority complex, which is really something that I don't appreciate.
Thank you. And Ruth Leonard.
Alrighty, so talk to them, listen to them, help them grow.
Excellent. You guys are so amazing. So we will turn it over now to Dr. Charlene Gilbert to bring order to all of these wonderful ideas. Dr. Gilbert.
Hi there, everybody. I don't know that I have much to bring order to. This was a wonderful, fabulous panel. So I really thank you, Anjali, Ruth, Treva and Amy for joining us and just laying it all out so clearly. I really am inspired by kind of the insights that all you share. And Ruth, this is the second time you and I have shared like a space. So I'm so pleased to see you. I've been hearing so much about all the good work you're doing in the community, and it gives some of us old souls like a lot of faith and confidence in the future. So I'm, so keep on. I guess I did hear some themes in what you all were saying. So if that's at all helpful, maybe that I can offer. It seems to me that, because I was writing down some things, and one of the things is we talked about, it seems like from K through higher education, that when we look at higher education, one of the big themes about what's going on now is that women are doing, at the very least, they're doing double duty, right? For women, depending on your class, your position in society, your access to income, you're doing triple and quadruple duty. And so I think that's really a significant, talking about, the mom who's at home working from a computer and taking care of her young child, that's already a challenge. The student who is not coming back because they have a whole family network that doesn't have the privilege of being able to work from home, right? So all their family members are having to go out to work, but somebody's got to be home to watch the kids. That turns out to be the young woman who was in her first year of her at the University of Toledo, or any university or college, right? those young women who were entering higher education are now being pulled back to support the family structure so that the family members who have to leave the home to go out and work have to do that. And then I think, you know, so, and then you have, and every variation of that, right? So there are also women who are working from home with kids and also doing, you know, talking about workplace and home place, and that I think that bright line has been eroding, and for some of us, it never existed, right? Work existed, there's work to do at home. We sometimes talk about that as reproductive labor, to the cooking, the cleaning, you know, all this is real work, right? Making 3 meals a day, keeping the house clean, and raising transportation, taking kids, staying home with sick kids, taking care of family members. That's like real work, but that's usually at home. So you got women who were doing all that work at home and then leaving to go to their jobs. Now they're at home doing all the work that they used to do in this other place, while still having that other job of taking care of everything that has to go in the home. Some women can export that work, right? Some women can assign that work, some of that work, to others. They can hire people, they can hire it out. So you can hire someone to clean your house, maybe, if you have the reason. You can hire someone to take your kids, do transportation. I know that some families who have resources have created educational pods for their kids. So they've even like hired tutors to tutor groups of 4 or 5 kids while they're working at home. That's one way of experiencing it. But then remember, there's a whole nother group of women who like don't have the money to have someone else do that, all that work that happens at home. And now they're doing the education work and they're doing the job. So understanding that the ways in which women have been experiencing this crisis are substantial. And again, at the very least, their work is doubled. And for a lot of women, it is quadrupled. I think another thing that came up that I really appreciate, we talk a lot about this. I'm the Dean of the College of Arts and Letters. I'm sorry that I was delayed in joining you. I was fighting my way into the Zoom call and Zoom was winning. I was like, so, but I got here. So I hope that they still share a little bit of my background, but I'm the Dean of the College of Arts and Letters here at the University of Toledo. And so one of the themes that we've been sharing all year is asking faculty to extend grace to students. And you know, in the institution, and as part of the Provost office has been extending grace to faculty. And I think what I heard from all of you is that grace all around is so critical to kind of how we get through this. I think talking about the different treatment of, oh, I'm sorry, I have another note. Mental health was a theme that came up, which I think is sort of connected to grace. Absolutely critical to continue to normalize that, because I think Black girls and Black women get trapped in this whole thing of, you're so strong. Let me tell you, since the election, I've gotten at least 5 emails and texts out of the blue, thanking me for being a strong Black woman. I'm like, oh, great. So glad you appreciate my strength. Can you make a donation to any charity for Black girls, please? Because like these emails and texts thanking me aren't really gonna put food on the table for my sister. So, but I think, but they get painted into a corner then, where like having a mental health issue and getting mental health is even harder if you constructed someone as being so strong that they couldn't possibly need help. And I think that we don't give that kind of grace and space, right? If a young African-American girl is struggling, might be struggling with depression, and how that depression gets acted out in school may look very differently how it works out or manifests for another girl. But rather than thinking about, okay, there's gotta be a reason for this, we need to kind of work, Black girls often get punished, right? They get punished, and the root cause may be about a mental health issue. So creating more space and grace so that all girls have the space to kind of attend to the mental health issues and are given that as a benefit of the doubt is absolutely critical. And then I think you guys said the word grace a lot, and I really appreciate that. I think that is kind of going to be maybe one of our ways out of this. Anjali, something you said spoke to me. You're talking about the sense that you may not deserve this opportunity. And I think Ruth has done all the work. She's broken it down for you. But I will tell you that is really just another form of racism. It's like the same old song, just a different tune. I mean, when I was in college, it usually went something like, it must be so hard for you to be in such and such space because how does it feel to be a token? I'd be like, I'm sorry, what? It's like, I beg your pardon. It's like, and I think it's a racist presumption that tries to make you unsure of your space and your position in that space by constructing this question. It's not really a question. It's not really a comment. It's fundamentally designed to try to undermine your sense of self and your sense of deserving to be in a place. And most of the women on this call, I'm gonna bet, would tell you, we've all worked triple hard to be where we are. Like, very few of us got handed anything. And so when someone says anything like that, I always nip it. I don't let it go by. I'm like, nope, let me be clear. Every single thing I've gotten, I've had to work my ass off for. So no, I have no apologies for standing in spaces. I earned it. Go talk to that dude over there who told me himself, I don't know how I got here. I wasn't even qualified for the job, and I got the job. And I'm always like, what? So do not let them even for a minute put that, because sometimes people say things and they leave it out there. You got to smack it down. And the best advice I got from the wisest woman I know, named Barbara Neely, a writer, she says, Charlene, you always have time to go back. Like, if you leave the next day, because that's the kind of stuff that sneaks up. Like, you'll be getting your plate of food to the buffet and someone will say something like that and you don't know what to do with it. And then you go home and you're thinking about it. Just think about what you want to say. Call up Ruth. She'll give you good something to say. And then the next time you see that person, clarify the record. Say, I'm sorry, the other day you said something to me. I just want to be clear. I have a 4.0. I am really, really I work very hard. And I hope you weren't in any way suggesting that I didn't deserve to be here, because that's obviously not clear. Is that what you meant? And you'll see them melt away. Usually doesn't take much when you confront them with a mirror to what they're actually saying. So thank you for sharing that and reminding us that we all have work to continue to do to hold the line, because the fight is still out there. So thank you all for everything that you're doing to advance women in education. It is absolutely critical. I consider education a democratic society, and I feel like we have to keep kind of making sure that we support women to make it through these barriers, because there are so many and there will continue to be barriers, and we have to continue to sort of analyze them, figure out where they are, and move them out the way so that more women can come behind us. I don't know. I feel like I love to have, if there's time, I don't know how much more time we have, but
I think we have, thank you so much, Dean Gilbert, and all of the panel. I feel filled with grace and given space, and really fortunate to be here with you all. We do have a few minutes. Angie Fitzpatrick said we should not be captives to time, and we did start by design 5 minutes late. So other people who are here who have something they would like to say, I think that we can take several minutes here. So just shout it right out or raise your hand if you're more comfortable.
Hello, I have been over here ready to burst. This is Valerie Walston. This discussion has been absolutely amazing. I want to speak specifically to Amy Thompson's comments and Ruth's comments when you guys were talking about, what the question on the table was, what can you do to include people at the table? What can you do as an administrator when you see things associated with racism and lack of diversity? What can you do? And both of you gave excellent advice. But I want to say this, it is so important to make sure that the face of the person who brings the issue forward is not always a person of color. So Amy and Ruth, you guys are in the same fight. Amy, your voice is going to be a little more powerful because you are using your privilege to move the needle forward. I sit on one of these work committees, not to downgrade Ruth's voice at all, because I know your voice is going to be heard, but I sit on a panel, a community group with a white male, and he is always talking about Black females and what can we do to uplift them? What can we do? These are the things that I see. And he speaks about racism and issues, so freely. I asked him, I said, how did you become so comfortable with discussing these issues? So my second point is this: build those relationships with everyone, with people who don't look like you. So together we can move the needle forward as it relates to dispelling racism and being more inclusive. Thank you so much to all the phenomenal women here today.
Thank you, Valerie Watson. Who else is bursting to say something?
I just want to say thank you all for your words. Thank you for, everything that you guys are about. And there we go. How do I decline this? Sorry, right when I speak. So thank you all so much. Thank you, Ruth, for just going right in and telling Anjali her worth. And, I just feel that that's exactly what we all have to do is we need to stop. When we hear that speech, that we go, hey, pull aside, talk to them and pour into them. And I think that that's so very important. And I just appreciate everyone's work, and let's keep it going.
Thank you, Diana Patton. One more word from someone who hasn't had a
Hi.
chance yet.
I just wanted to thank all the panelists as well, and just share something that I've been thinking about, and it speaks to what Dean Gilbert pulled together as a theme, the theme of grace. And one of the things I was thinking about is like, what a shame it is that it took a pandemic for us to really, recognize the need for this grace. And also, will this grace continue? How can we make sure and ensure that it continues? And especially because we know how much it benefits women, particularly women with disabilities, women of color, and just how can we keep this grace momentum and just how can we keep it moving forward?
Great. Thank you, Carrie Peralta. That was a wonderful last word. I will officially, as the moderator, say the session is over, but I think that the room will remain open for a while. So we are officially concluded, but feel free to keep talking. Thank you.